Have you ever found yourself just standing outside on a perfectly clear, pitch black night, far away from the city lights, and just staring up at that dense, chaotic smear of the Milky Way?
Oh, absolutely. It's completely mesmerizing when you get away from the light pollution.
Right. Or like maybe you've been caught out in the open when a sudden biting chill just drops the temperature 10 degrees in a matter of seconds, and this massive hailstorm rolls over the ridgeline.
Yeah, that's a very specific kind of terrifying.
It really is. And when those things happen today, we almost instantly default to our technology, right? We check a weather app for a high-resolution radar loop, or we pull up an astronomy app that draws all those neat little constellation lines across our phone screens.
Right, because we have satellite imagery and barometric pressure readings and, centuries of formalized physics to tell us exactly what is happening and why it's happening.
Exactly. But I want you to strip all of that away for a second. Before Doppler radar, before the James Webb Space Telescope, how did people explain the wild, dynamic, and honestly incredibly dangerous world around them?
Well, I mean, you would have to build a completely different kind of science. And that's really what we are looking at today. Because when you don't have digital sensors or orbital satellites, your primary instruments are your own eyes.
Your eyes, your memory.
Yes. And this incredibly acute, multi-generational observation of the natural landscape. You literally have to rely on narrative to store and transmit your data.
Which brings us to the fascinating stack of sources we are opening up today for this deep dive. We're looking at the foundational ethnographic collection called Myths of the Cherokee, compiled by James Mooney.
Yeah, and for some context, Mooney was an ethnographer who went deep into the mountains of western North Carolina back in the late 19th century, specifically around the 1880s.
Right. He lived among the East Cherokee on the Qualla boundary.
And his approach is just crucial to understand here. He wasn't just like an outsider casually collecting quaint fairy tales to publish in a children's book. He truly embedded himself.
He sat for hours, days, months, right?
Exactly. He sat with the community's priests, the traditional doctors, and the keepers of oral history, specifically men like Swimmer, who is this highly respected leader of ceremony and essentially a living encyclopedia of Cherokee tradition.
Wow. So Mooney wrote down these narratives as they were translated, capturing this incredibly complex cosmological framework.
A framework that had been passed down, refined, and, tested against the natural world for countless generations.
So we aren't just looking at myths in the modern sort of dismissive sense of the word. We are looking at an ancient, highly observant science of the natural world, reverse engineered from the landscape. Okay, let's unpack this. Before there were mountains or storms or stars, where does the Cherokee universe actually begin?
It begins with a profound sense of precariousness. In the Cherokee Genesis, the solid ground we walk on today, it just did not exist. Initially, the Earth was a great flat island.
But not like a rock island.
No, not rock or soil. It was soft, wet mud. And this muddy island was suspended by 4 cords at the 4 cardinal points, hanging down from the solid rock vault of the sky above, hovering over this vast, seemingly infinite ocean.
Let me stop you right there, because a flat, wet island suspended by 4 cords over an ocean. I mean, that is an incredibly fragile image.
It really is.
It feels less like a majestic permanent creation and more like a temporary suspension bridge that could just snap at any moment.
Well, that fragility is entirely intentional, and Mooney's sources emphasize the psychological weight of that. The belief recorded by the traditionalists was that the world would eventually grow old and worn out.
Wait, really? Like an expiration date?
Essentially, yeah. When it wears out, the people will die, those 4 massive cords will fray and break, and the entire Earth will just plummet back down into the ocean.
Oh, wow. Everything becomes water again.
Exactly. There's a built-in obsolescence to existence right from the very start.
Imagine carrying that worldview. It means you don't view the Earth as this invincible permanent bedrock. You view it as a delicate system that requires maintenance and respect, or the whole thing literally drops into the abyss.
Right. You have a responsibility to it.
But looking at the ancestral homeland of the Cherokee, western North Carolina, eastern Tennessee, northern Georgia, that is not a flat, muddy island. It is dominated by the towering, rugged peaks of the Great Smoky Mountains. So how does this soft mud become a mountain range?
So to get to the mountains, we have to look up to that solid rock vault of the sky, a realm they called Galun'yalati. Originally, all the animals lived up there. but the sources note that Galunulati was getting crowded.
Overpopulation even back then.
Yeah, the animal population was booming and they needed more room. They looked down through the vault and saw the water below, but no solid land. So they sent down an explorer. And they didn't send a majestic eagle or, like, a powerful bear. They sent the water beetle. Yeah, a tiny insect they referred to as the mellow bug.
That's a brilliant detail. I mean, it's usually a titan or a god in Western mythology that pulls the earth from the deep. Here, it's a water bug.
It highlights a recurring theme in Cherokee science, honestly. The smallest, most unassuming creatures often perform the most vital tasks. So the water beetle dove down beneath the surface of the vast ocean all the way to the bottom and brought up the very first tiny clump of soft mud.
And that mud starts to spread.
Right. It began to spread and grow into the island, suspended by those 4 cords. But as you pointed out, it was still flat and far too soft for the animals to actually live on. It needed to be dried and shaped. So the animals up in Galunulati sent down the great buzzard to prepare the earth.
And to be clear, this isn't just, a regular turkey vulture you see circling over a highway. This is the mythic primordial father of all buzzards.
Enormous, just massive in scale. And the scale is necessary to explain the geography. The great buzzard flew low over the newly formed soft earth, flapping his massive wings to dry the mud.
Okay, so he's fanning it.
Right, but by the time he reached the Cherokee country in the southeast, he was utterly exhausted. He was flying so low, struggling to stay aloft, that his massive wings began to strike the soft mud.
Oh, and this is where the topography is born.
Precisely. Wherever the buzzard's downward wing beat struck the earth, it gouged out a deep, plunging valley, and wherever those massive wings turned up again on the upstroke, they pulled the sticky, soft mud up into a towering mountain peak.
That perfectly captures the feeling of the Smoky Mountains. Like if you've ever hiked there or driven through the Blue Ridge Parkway, the landscape isn't orderly. It's chaotic, rolling, and incredibly steep.
It's very dramatic.
Yeah, and the exhaustion of a massive struggling bird physically carving out the valleys and lifting the peaks, it makes so much sense visually. The mountains are the literal imprint of a mythical struggle.
And the animals watching from the sky vault saw what he was doing and panicked. They were afraid the whole world would become nothing but impassable mountains, leaving no flat land for them to live on at all.
So they recall him.
Yeah, they immediately called him back. But the damage or the creation was already done. The Cherokee country remains full of those steep mountains and deep valleys to this very day.
Okay, so the earth has its shape, the mud is drying into rock and soil, and the animals finally come down from the sky vault. But there's a new problem, right? It's dark.
Very dark.
They need light, so they get the sun. But they don't quite understand how to install it properly. They set the sun on a track to cross the island, but they set it dangerously close to the ground.
Right, the baseline temperature was just catastrophic. The sun was literally scorching the newly formed Earth. And Mooney's sources offer this fascinating biological detail here to prove how hot it was. The sun was so close that it scorched the shell of the red crawfish.
Let me play devil's advocate for a second here. Why a crawfish? If you're going to invent a story about the earth burning up, why not say it scorched a deer or a bear or a tree? Why focus on a small crustacean?
Well, if you look at the ecological logic, the crawfish is actually the perfect subject. Where do crawfish live?
In the mud, right? In shallow creeks.
Exactly. They live in the shallow mud and the slow-moving creeks. If a massive heat source was lowered to the earth, the shallow water would boil first, and the mud would bake solid. The creature most vulnerable to this specific type of environmental catastrophe is the crawfish.
Oh, wow.
The story notes that its shell turned bright red, just like a lobster dropped in a boiling pot, and its meat was completely spoiled.
And that ties directly into daily life.
Right.
Right, because the Cherokee don't eat the red crawfish.
They do not. It's a dietary taboo wrapped inside a cosmogonic myth. The myth explains the origin of the cosmos, but it also dictates nutritional behavior, and it reflects a deep understanding of habitat vulnerability.
That's amazing. But returning to the crisis, the world is burning, the water is boiling, the crawfish are ruined. The conjurers, the spiritual leaders of the people, have to step in and fix the mechanics of the sky.
Right. They act almost like ancient engineers. They realize they have a proximity issue, so they physically push the sun up higher. They push it up by the width of a handbreadth.
But they test it, and it's still too hot.
Yeah, so they push it up another handbreadth. They repeat this process, calibrating the heat a total of 7 times.
Because 7 is a very significant number for them.
Very much so. 7 is the most sacred and structurally important number in Cherokee tradition, representing the 4 cardinal directions plus up, down, and center. They push the sun up to what they call the seventh height, stopping just under the solid arch of the sky vault.
It's basically an ancient HVAC system. They recognize that the sun isn't just a glowing disk, it's a massive thermal radiator. And it requires precise, human-like intervention to dial in the perfect thermostat setting for biological life to thrive.
Exactly.
If it's too close, everything burns. Too far, everything freezes. The seventh height is the habitable zone.
The concept of the habitable zone is exactly right. And what's truly remarkable is how their understanding of this thermal calibration above the Earth tied into their geological understanding of what was happening beneath the Earth.
Right, the underworld.
Yeah, while they were setting the temperature of the sky, they were also theorizing about the deep ground. The Cherokee believed there was an underworld, a realm directly beneath the mud and rock of our world.
And the underworld is described as a mirror image of our world. Correct. Same animals, same mountains, same trees.
With one massive, crucial difference. The thermodynamics are inverted. The seasons are reversed.
Wait, reverse.
Yes. When it is the dead of winter here on the surface, it is the peak of summer in the underworld. And when we are sweating through July, they are freezing in December.
I have to push back on this, because up to this point, the myths have had a very visible logic. Mountains look like bird tracks, crawfish turn red when boiled. But an underworld with reversed seasons, that sounds like a pure leap of imagination, like a classic fairy tale trope. How could they possibly claim to know what the seasons are doing miles beneath the Earth?
Well, what's fascinating here is that it sounds like magic until you look at the landscape they were living in. It's actually a brilliant piece of empirical deduction.
Okay, I'm listening.
The Cherokee spent generations living in the deep valleys of the Appalachians. They relied on the mountain springs for their drinking water. If you observe a deep mountain spring year-round, you'll notice a distinct physical anomaly.
Oh, the temperature differential.
Yes. The water emerging from deep within the rock feels noticeably warm in the freezing months of winter, and it feels refreshingly cool in the blistering heat of summer relative to the outside air.
Okay, that is incredible. They didn't have thermometers to tell them that the groundwater is actually maintaining a constant baseline temperature of, say, 55 degrees, while the surface air fluctuates wildly.
Right, they just felt the water on their hands. In December, the water feels warm. In July, the water feels cold.
And from that single observable data point, they reverse-engineered a cosmological theory. They logically deduced that these springs weren't just water sources, they were portals.
Doorways to a realm where the seasonal thermostat was flipped.
The warm water in winter was literally spilling over from the underworld summer. It is a flawless logical progression based on the localized geological evidence they had at their disposal.
Exactly. It perfectly links a localized geological phenomenon to a massive cosmological theory.
That completely changes how you view a mountain spring. It's not just hydration, it's a leak from another dimension. So the Earth is shaped, the sun's baseline temperature is set at the seventh height, and the underworld's inverted climate is established.
Stage is set.
But that just covers the static background of the universe. What about the dynamic, unpredictable day-to-day weather? Like, how do they explain a sudden thunderstorm sweeping over those newly formed mountains?
So the daily weather wasn't viewed as a system of shifting high and low pressure fronts. It was intensely personified, and it demanded constant interaction. Let's look at thunderstorms. In the Cherokee worldview, thunder wasn't just an acoustic echo bouncing off the valley walls.
It was alive.
Yes, thunder was a family of immensely powerful beings known as the Anihunitikwalaski, the Thunderers.
The Great Thunder and his two sons, who were called the Little Men.
That's right. They live far in the west, high above the solid rock of the sky vault. And they aren't just responsible for the booming noise. The visual elements of a storm, the jagged lightning and the sweeping arc of the rainbow are actually described as their magnificent clothing.
Now, there's a very specific and strict rule about the rainbow in Mooney's records, isn't there? Like a severe taboo?
A very severe taboo. The tradition dictates that you must never, under any circumstances, point your finger directly at a rainbow.
Or else what?
If you do, your finger will swell up at the lower joint, potentially crippling your hand.
Why a rainbow, though? Universally, across so many cultures, a rainbow is a symbol of peace or a bridge or just something beautiful after a storm. Why attach a crippling physical punishment to pointing at it?
Well, it comes down to their understanding of atmospheric power. The rainbow is the garment of the Thunderers. These are beings capable of striking trees and splitting boulders with lightning. They are incredibly dangerous.
So it's about respect.
Exactly. Pointing at someone's clothing, especially a powerful entity, is an act of supreme disrespect. It treats a manifestation of raw, lethal power as a mere curiosity. The taboo enforces distance, reverence, and a healthy fear of the storm's lingering energy.
You don't casually point at a live wire.
Exactly. You acknowledge it, you respect it,
Yeah.
but you don't treat it like a toy. And the thunderers above the sky vault are generally considered helpful if approached with the proper prayers, bringing the rains needed for the crops. But the Cherokee also believed in lesser thunder spirits who lived much closer to home.
Like where?
Inside the cliffs, behind waterfalls, deep in the rock fissures. These lower thunder spirits were notorious for plotting mischief and causing localized sudden storms.
So you had to constantly navigate the moods of the landscape. Speaking of localized storms, I want to dive into one of my absolute favorite accounts from Mooney's collection. It's the story of the Iceman.
Oh, this is a great one.
Because this isn't a general creation myth, this is a highly specific, tactical meteorological event.
It is deeply tactical, and to understand it, we really need to understand Cherokee forest management. In the autumn, the Cherokee would traditionally use controlled burns. They would set low-intensity fires to clear the dense layer of fallen leaves and underbrush from the mountain slopes.
Which is actually a very sound ecological practice.
Very sound. It served multiple purposes. It returned nutrients to the soil, cleared sightlines for hunting, and made it significantly easier to gather the massive amounts of chestnuts that fell from the trees.
So imagine you're a Cherokee farmer or hunter. You set your controlled burn on the ridge. You know what you're doing. Your people have done this for centuries. But then the wind shifts, the weather turns unnaturally dry, and the fire escapes your control.
And that is the exact scenario the myth addresses. The story tells of a time when a controlled burn went horribly wrong. The fire burned so deep into the forest floor, getting into the thick layer of organic duff and the root systems, that it created a massive, terrifying pit of flames.
An underground fire.
Yes, the people tried beating it out. They tried carrying water from the creeks, but it was an underground inferno. It was completely beyond human control.
So the people are desperate. Their landscape is turning to ash. So they send messengers sprinting far to the north looking for a savior, and they find the Iceman.
The Iceman is described in the sources as a little fellow living in a house made entirely of ice. But his defining physical characteristic is his hair. He has incredibly long hair hanging all the way down to his feet, and it is tightly braided into two long plaits.
Now here's where it gets really interesting. When I first read this, I thought it was just a quirky fairy tale detail. A guy in an ice house with long braids, but then the messengers beg him for help to put out the fire. And instead of performing a grand magical ritual or handing them a magical artifact, he just unties his hair. He simply unbraids it.
Right.
What is the mechanism here? Why focus so heavily on the hair?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, you have to look at it as a visual metaphor for a weather front. Connect the physical action of the Iceman to the massive macro scale of mountain weather.
Okay, paint the picture.
Picture yourself standing in a wide valley in the dead of winter, looking up at a distant peak. A violent winter storm is rolling over the crest of the mountain. The Iceman takes his unbraided hair in one hand and strikes it sharply across his other hand. The moment he does this, the messengers feel a sudden, freezing wind blow through the ice house.
The leading edge of the cold front.
He strikes his hair a second time, and a light, freezing rain begins to fall.
He strikes it a third time, and the rain hardens into sleet.
And on the fourth strike, great, heavy hailstones fall, clattering to the ground as if they are pouring out from the very ends of his unbound hair. He tells the messengers to go back to their burning mountain, assuring them he will handle it.
And the storm follows.
The next day, a massive howling storm sweeps down from the north. Initially, the high winds actually whip the flames higher, making the people panic, but then the freezing rain hits, then the sleet. And finally, a colossal, suffocating deluge of heavy hail pours down, completely extinguishing that deep underground fire.
The visual poetry of the hair is what gets me. The act of unbraiding hair and striking it across a hand mimics the exact visual of sweeping, streaking sheets of rain and hail coming across a mountain valley. If you've ever watched a heavy rainstorm approach from a distance, the dark clouds don't just look like gray blobs.
No, they have texture.
Exactly. The rain falls in these distinct sweeping curtains. It literally looks like long, gray, wet strands of hair dragging across the horizon.
It is a pure, brilliant observational metaphor. They took the terrifying, chaotic force of a winter storm and personified it, but they gave it physical characteristics and actions that perfectly mirror the physical reality of how a storm looks and behaves. The hair is the rain curtain, the striking of the hands, the concussive force of the wind and hail.
It's meteorology rendered as poetry. And they didn't just apply this logic to the weather systems trapped under the sky vault. They applied the same rigorous observational logic to astronomical anomalies. Let's talk about eclipses.
Oh, an eclipse is perhaps the most disruptive natural phenomenon an ancient culture could experience. Think about the careful calibration we discussed earlier, the conjurers painstakingly pushing the sun up 7 handbreadths to set the perfect temperature.
Right. They fought hard for that sunlight. So what happens when, in the middle of a perfectly clear day, a shaddy begins to eat the sun, the temperature drops, the birds go quiet, and the sky goes dark? It must have felt like the end of the world, like those 4 cords holding the earth were about to snap.
Absolutely. To explain a solar or lunar eclipse, the Cherokee believed a giant mythic frog was attempting to swallow the sun or the moon.
A giant frog in the sky. Now, the natural human reaction to the sun disappearing might be to hide in your home, terrified. But the Cherokee response was incredibly proactive.
It was pure action. The community would immediately drop whatever they were doing. They would gather together in the center of the settlement. They would fire their rifles into the air, beat drums, bang pots, shout at the top of their lungs, and make as much deafening noise as humanly possible.
Just absolute chaos.
Yeah, their goal was to frighten the giant celestial frog away before it could swallow the light completely.
And here's the best part. It always worked.
Always. After a few minutes of deafening noise, the shadow would recede, the sun would return, and the warmth would come back to the earth.
It is a closed-loop execution of the scientific method. Observation. The sun is slowly disappearing. Hypothesis. A giant frog is eating our heat source. Experiment. Make a terrifying amount of noise to scare the predator. Result. The sun comes back. Conclusion. Our noise-making successfully scared the frog. It is flawless logic based entirely on the evidence and results they could observe.
It really highlights a worldview where humans are not just passive observers of nature. You don't just watch an eclipse happen, you are an active participant in the cosmos. You have a communal responsibility to rescue the sun. If you don't make the noise, the frog finishes its meal and the world freezes.
That transition from looking at the clouds to looking past them brings us to the canvas of the night sky. How did the Cherokee map the heavens? Because when they looked up at the stars, they didn't see what we see today. We are taught that stars are burning balls of hydrogen and helium, nuclear furnaces millions of light years away, utterly devoid of life.
The Cherokee perspective was drastically different. While opinions varied somewhat among different bands, Mooney recorded the most common and persistent belief. The stars were living creatures.
Biological entities.
Yes, but they weren't just glowing people. They were described as strange, spherical creatures covered in luminous fur or brilliant glowing feathers that radiated light.
Glowing, feathered creatures hovering in the dark. There's a specific anecdote in Mooney's sources that I found haunting. It's about a hunting party camped high up in the mountains.
Oh, yes. The hunters are camped on a ridge at night, and they notice 2 incredibly bright lights moving slowly along a distant peak. They think it might be another tribe or perhaps enemies, so they carefully approach through the woods to investigate.
And what do they find?
When they get close, they don't find humans with torches. They find 2 strange, round creatures covered head to toe in soft, luminous feathers that sparkled like starlight. As the hunters watch, the creatures realize they are being observed. A breeze picks up and the creatures simply float away, rising higher and higher above the pines until they merge into the night sky to become stars.
It's such a beautiful, almost sci-fi image. But what I find most fascinating about their astronomy isn't just the physical nature of the stars, but the stories they attached to the constellations. They projected deeply familiar earthly narratives onto the largest formations in the galaxy. Take the Milky Way, for example. We call it a galaxy, a cold, clinical term for a collection of billions of stars. What did the Cherokee call it?
The Cherokee name for the Milky Way is Yili Utsunya, which translates directly to where the dog ran.
Where the dog ran. Tell us the story behind that.
The myth centers around a southern Cherokee settlement. The people there had a large communal corn mill where they ground their harvest into fine white cornmeal, but they noticed that their reserves were depleting faster than they should. Someone, or something, was secretly stealing their cornmeal in the dead of night.
The classic village mystery.
Right. So the people decide to set a trap. They hide in the shadows around the mill and keep watch. Late at night, they see a massive, terrifying spirit dog creep into the settlement. The dog goes straight to the mill and begins ravenously eating the white cornmeal out of the stone bowl.
And they catch him.
The people wait until his head is deep in the bowl, and then they spring out from their hiding places, shouting and whipping the giant dog with sticks.
The dog panics. It turns and sprints away from the settlement, howling, running furiously toward the north. But as it runs, its mouth is still full of the dry, white cornmeal. It gasps and pants, and the cornmeal spills out of the sides of its mouth, leaving a long, dusty, white trail across the dark night sky. And that trail is the Milky Way.
It's an incredibly localized, domestic explanation for a massive, incomprehensible cosmic structure. They look at a galactic arm spanning hundreds of thousands of light years, and they explain it using a thieving village dog and a spilled bowl of food.
Yeah.
And we see the exact same grounding technique with their explanation for the Pleiades star cluster.
The Pleiades, those 7 tight little stars that are so distinct in the winter sky. In Greek mythology, they are the 7 sisters, daughters of a Titan. But the Cherokee name for them is Anitsutsa.
Which simply translates to the boys.
And these aren't warrior boys or heroic demigods. They are basically juvenile delinquents.
They are. The story goes that long ago, in a Cherokee village, there were 7 boys who spent all of their time down by the communal townhouse playing a game called Getayusti.
Let's pause and visualize that game because Mooney goes into detail about it. Getayusti isn't just tossing a ball around.
No, it's a highly physical game of skill and prediction. It's played with a heavy, smoothly polished stone disc, like a thick wheel and a long wooden stick. One player hurls the stone wheel down a smooth dirt alley so it rolls at high speed. The other players then hurl their long sticks after it, sliding them along the ground, trying to predict exactly where the rolling stone will eventually fall and come to rest. The stick that lands closest to the stopped stone scores.
It requires intense focus, athleticism, and hours of practice, which makes the context of this story a major point of cultural rebellion, because these 7 boys are playing Getayusti all day, every day, specifically to avoid working in the cornfields.
Agriculture was the grueling bedrock of survival. Everyone had to pull their weight. So when the boys refuse to weed the fields, their mothers become furious. They decide to teach the boys a lesson about the value of labor and food.
Oh, a tough lesson.
Very. When the boys come home for dinner expecting a hot meal of boiled corn, their mothers serve them wooden bowls filled with boiling Getayusti stones.
The mothers basically say, since you love these stones more than the cornfields, you can eat the stones. It is a harsh, brutal parenting tactic.
Very harsh. And the boys are humiliated and enraged. They refuse to eat. They go back down to the townhouse, but instead of playing the game, they begin a specific rhythmic dance. They dance in a tight circle, moving faster and faster. And as they dance, the anger and the rhythm literally make them lighter. They begin to lose their physical gravity. They start to float up off the ground.
The mothers see this happening from the houses. They drop everything and run to the townhouse, crying and pleading for their sons to stop and come back. But it's too late. The boys are already floating above the rooftops, circling higher and higher into the air.
6 of the boys circle relentlessly higher until they reach the solid rock vault of the sky, passing through it to become the 6 brightest visible stars of the Pleiades cluster.
But there were 7 boys.
Right. The mother of the 7th boy manages to grab one of the long wooden Getayusti poles. She reaches up as her son floats past, hooks him with the pole, and violently pulls him down.
But the physical momentum of his ascent is so strong, and the downward pull so forceful, that when he hits the ground, he doesn't just fall. He strikes the dirt with such impact that he sinks completely into the earth, buried instantly.
The mother is devastated. She comes to that exact spot in the dirt every single day, weeping over the place where her son vanished. Her tears constantly water the damp earth, and eventually a small green shoot emerges from the soil where he was buried. It grows tall and strong, covered in needles. It becomes the very first pine tree.
Wow. So from this one story about misbehaving teenagers refusing to do their chores, you get the origin of a major celestial star cluster, and you get the botanical origin of the pine tree.
But taking a step back, I have to ask about the psychology of this. So what does this all mean? We have a thieving dog making the Milky Way and truant boys turning into stars. It feels so mundane. Why project these incredibly grounded, stressful, village-level events, crop theft, rebellious teenagers, strict parenting onto the vast, infinite universe?
It's a profound coping mechanism for dealing with the terror of the unknown. Think about their environment. You are living in a relatively small settlement surrounded by the vast, dense, dark forests of the Appalachian Mountains. At night, the sky above you is infinite, cold, and utterly indifferent to your survival. It's overwhelming. Yeah, you feel tiny.
But by placing your own corn mills, your own nuisance village dogs, and your own children's games up in the sky, you domesticate the cosmos.
You make the infinite familiar.
Exactly. The universe suddenly feels like a neighborhood extension rather than a terrifying void. When a Cherokee farmer looks up at the Milky Way, he doesn't feel existentially small. He sees the tracks of the dog that stole the cornmeal. He sees the boys playing the game he plays in the village square. It grounds the community, placing human drama at the center of the celestial map. It's a way of claiming the sky as your own territory.
That is such a comforting psychological framework, and it's a perfect transition. We just talked about how a mother's grief over that seventh boy literally seeded the first pine tree. It shows how deeply the Cherokee believed human emotion and behavior were entangled with the flora and fauna. Which makes me wonder, if a pine tree can be born from human grief, how did the rest of the forest come to be? Because if the stars have a history, the plants and animals surrounding their villages definitely do too.
They absolutely do. The origin of the pine tree is just one specific piece of a much larger botanical framework. The Cherokee had a comprehensive, foundational myth to explain the most obvious visual difference in the forest. Why some trees lose their leaves and look dead in the winter, the deciduous trees, and why others, like the pine, the spruce, and the cedar, stay green all year round.
And this explanation ties right back to the very beginning of the world, when the animals and plants were first created, right?
Yes, immediately after creation, the plants and animals were given a divine command. They were told to stay awake and keep strict watch for 7 continuous nights.
7 nights of pure wakefulness. That is a brutal test of endurance. It mirrors the actual physical fasts and vigils that young Cherokee men would undergo before a major hunt or a battle to prove their discipline.
It's the ultimate test of stamina. And, predictably, most of the plants and animals failed. By the 2nd or 3rd night, many fell asleep. By the 6th night, almost the entire forest was slumbering.
And there was a consequence.
As a direct punishment for failing the ordeal, the trees that fell asleep lost their hair, their leaves, when the winter cold arrived. They were stripped bare. But a few trees endured the suffering. The cedar, the pine, the spruce, the holly, and the laurels managed to keep their eyes open through the dawn of the 7th day.
And their reward is the gift of perpetual life, the ability to remain green and vibrant year-round. It's a brilliant way of taking a biological, ecological trait and explaining it through a moral lens. Endurance brings a permanent reward. Failure to endure brings a cyclical death.
And among those evergreens that stayed awake, the cedar was considered the most sacred of all. If you look at cedar wood, it doesn't warp easily. It naturally repels insects. It doesn't decay quickly in the damp mountain air. And it has that strong, purifying, balsamic fragrance. Because it possessed the greatest endurance, it was highly prized and used almost exclusively for ceremonial purposes by the priests.
But even an evergreen tree needs warmth to survive the winter. We talked about the conjurers pushing the sun up to heat the earth, but that's ambient heat. Humans and animals didn't have fire down on the ground yet. They couldn't cook, they couldn't warm themselves at night. How did they get it?
The origin of the first fire is one of the most famous stories in Mooney's collection. According to the sources, the thunders, those powerful beings who wear the lightning, sent down a bolt from the sky vault and placed a burning fire into the deep bottom of a hollow sycamore tree.
But there's a catch. The sycamore tree is growing on an island, surrounded by deep water. The animals, who are freezing on the mainland, can see the smoke billowing out of the top of the tree, but they can't get to the flames.
So they hold a council. And this is a recurring theme. The animals are highly organized. They hold meetings, debate strategy, and elect volunteers. Several animals try to cross the water and retrieve the fire, and they all fail. But their failures explain their physical characteristics today.
Like the raven, right.
Yeah, the raven flies over to the island and lands on the sycamore, but the heat is so intense his feathers are scorched black. The screech owl flies over and peers down into the hollow trunk, but a blast of hot air and smoke hits him in the face, nearly blinding him.
Which perfectly explains why the screech owl has red eyes,
Right?
and why it hides in the dark and only comes out at night. Its eyes were permanently damaged by the first fire.
Exactly. Then the black racer snake swims across and slithers through a hole in the bottom of the trunk, but he gets trapped in the hot ashes and is scorched black before he can escape. The great birds and the fast snakes are all failing. They are losing hope. Finally, one of the smallest, most easily overlooked creatures in the council steps up and volunteers.
The water spider.
The water spider. She says she can do it. The other animals are skeptical, but she has a plan. She spins a strong silken thread from her own body, weaves it tightly into a tiny waterproof bowl, what the Cherokee call a tusty bowl, and fastens it securely to her back. She scurries swiftly across the surface of the water, completely immune to the deep currents.
And she makes it.
She slips through the burning grass on the island, finds a single glowing red coal, places it into her woven tustine bowl, and carries it back across the water to the freezing animals.
And the Cherokee note that if you look at a water spider today, you can still see that little round bump, the shape of the tusking bowl, sitting on her back. It's a phenomenal underdog story. The creatures with the greatest wingspans and the fastest speed fail, but the tiny, industrious spider with a clever piece of engineering succeeds in saving the world.
And what's vital to recognize in these stories is the social structure of the animals. They are holding councils. In the Cherokee worldview, the animal kingdom was governed just like human society. They had chiefs, they had townhouses, and they had distinct tribes. The bear tribe, the deer tribe, the insect tribes.
Wow.
And understanding that political organization is crucial for grasping one of the most complex, sophisticated myths in the entire collection, the epic origin of disease and medicine.
I'm so glad we are digging into this. When I read this section in Mooney's book, I was just floored. It is a masterpiece of ecological storytelling. Set the scene for us. What was the relationship between humans and animals like before disease existed?
In the old times, the golden age of creation, humans, animals, plants, and even insects lived in perfect harmony. They were essentially equals, they could speak the same language, they understood each other, and there was mutual respect. But then the human population began to multiply rapidly.
They started taking over.
They began to crowd the animals out of the forests, and worse, humans invented new, devastating technologies. They invented bows and arrows, blowguns and spears. They stopped hunting just for survival and began slaughtering the animals carelessly. They trampled the insects underfoot without a second thought. They showed absolutely no respect for the lives they were taking or the balance of the ecosystem.
They broke the contract. The way I view this story is almost like the first ever labor strike, but combined with biological warfare. The animals realize that the management, the humans, are exploiting the workforce and destroying the factory floor. So they organize a coordinated, lethal pushback against human arrogance.
That analogy holds up perfectly. The animals realize they are facing extinction, so they hold a series of urgent tribal councils to declare outright war on humanity. The bears meet first. They debate going to war, but they realize their natural weapons, their claws and teeth, aren't long enough to defeat the human bows and arrows. But the deer tribe, led by a powerful spirit known as the little deer, comes up with a far more insidious and devastating plan.
Biological warfare. How does the little deer weaponize his tribe?
Well, this raises an important question about hunting ethics. The deer tribe decrees that they cannot stop humans from hunting them. It is the nature of the world. However, if a human hunter kills a deer, he must follow a strict ritual. He must ask for pardon. He must stand over the body, pray to the spirit of the deer, and explain that he only killed out of necessity to feed his family, showing ultimate respect.
And if he doesn't?
If a hunter kills a deer and walks away without asking pardon, the little deer, who is invisible, will track that hunter back to his village.
And what does he do to the hunter?
He strikes the hunter with a crippling magical blast of rheumatism. The hunter's joints will swell, his back will lock up, and he will be paralyzed with pain. He will never be able to bend his arms to draw a bow or walk the mountain trails again.
It is a brilliantly targeted strike. You abuse your mobility to carelessly kill us, we will take your mobility away.
Precisely. And the other tribes follow suit. The fishes and reptiles hold a council and invent nightmares. The insects, furious at being constantly stepped on, hold a massive council and invent every fatal, contagious disease known to humanity. They name the diseases, categorize them, and release them like a plague into the world to wipe out the humans who have destroyed the environmental balance.
This shows an incredibly deep, sophisticated ecological consciousness. The Cherokee didn't view humans as masters separated from nature, sitting at the top of a pyramid. They viewed humans as deeply entangled within a web. If you abuse the environment doesn't just degrade passively, it actively strikes back. Disease isn't just a random stroke of bad luck or a punishment from a distant god. It is a direct environmental consequence of human overconsumption.
It is a mythological framework designed to enforce sustainable hunting practices. You don't just kill everything you see. You take only what you need, and you ask for pardon, or the deer tribe will ruin your body. But obviously, humanity didn't go extinct. We survived the animal plagues.
Right, how did we survive?
Because the plant kingdom intervened. When the plant world heard what the animals were doing, they took pity on humanity. The plants were not angry. They felt humans were foolish but worthy of saving. So every single tree, every shrub, every herb, and even the smallest blades of grass held their own counsel. And they offered themselves as a specific cure for one of the diseases invented by the animals.
The plants volunteered to become the medicine.
Exactly. The spirit of the pine tree volunteered to fight one disease. The ginseng root volunteered to fight another. This means that when a traditional Cherokee doctor goes into the deep woods to find an herb for a sick patient, he isn't just gathering chemical compounds. He is looking for the specific plant spirit that volunteered at the dawn of time to fight the specific animal spirit that is currently causing the disease. This myth is the foundational spiritual basis for their entire system of botanical medicine.
It's an epic, invisible war between the flora and the fauna, with humans caught right in the middle, surviving only by the grace of the weeds. It perfectly frames the symbiotic, balanced relationship we must maintain. The animals punish our arrogance, but the plants offer us grace.
And that tension between humans, the environment, and our own flaws culminates in the final stage of our deep dive. We've talked about how the world was shaped, how the thunder and ice operate, how the stars reflect village life, and how disease originated from our arrogance. But there are two permanent, grueling realities of human existence that require the deepest psychological explanation: the backbreaking nature of agriculture and the tragic permanence of death.
The cycle of life.
Yeah.
Why is it so hard to stay alive, and why do we inevitably fail? This brings us to the story of Kanati and Selu. According to Mooney, this is arguably the most sacred and culturally central of all the Cherokee origin stories.
It is the cornerstone of their agrarian society. The names are literal. Kanati translates to the lucky hunter, and his wife is Selu, which translates simply and powerfully as corn. Kanati and Selu lived with their little boy in the mountains during the very early days of humanity. And in these early days, life was a paradise. It was incredibly effortlessly easy.
Because they didn't have to work for their food.
Exactly. Kanati never failed a hunt. He never had to track a deer for days or freeze in a blind. He would simply walk into the woods and return an hour later with a fat deer or a flock of turkeys. And Selu would go into her small storehouse and emerge with massive baskets overflowing with fresh corn and beans, even though there were no plowed fields, no weeding, and no harvest to speak of.
But this paradise is disrupted by the introduction of chaos. The little boy goes down to the river where his mother, Selu, washes the blood from the game his father brings home. From the clots of blood in the water, a second boy springs to life.
The wild boy.
Yes, the wild boy. He is untamed, deeply mischievous, and represents the chaotic, curious nature of humanity. The two boys become inseparable, and they decide they need to figure out their parents' secrets. They want to know where the endless food is coming from.
First, they target the father, Kanati. They secretly follow him deep into the mountains. They hide in the brush and watch as Kanati approaches a massive rock face. He pulls aside a heavy stone door, revealing a gigantic sealed cave. And inside that cave, Kanati has penned up every single game animal in the entire world. He simply stands at the entrance, calls out a deer, shoots it, closes the rock, and goes home.
It's not hunting, it's a magical grocery store.
But the boys, driven by that chaotic curiosity, wait until Kanati leaves. They go to the rock face and they decide to open it themselves. They struggle with the heavy stone, and as they pry it open, it slips from their grasp. The rock falls open completely. Instantly, the animals see the light and stampede. A deafening rush of deer, turkeys, raccoons, rabbits, and bears bursts out of the cave, trampling past the terrified boys, and scatters into the deepest, most inaccessible parts of the mountain forests.
Kanati hears the thunder of hooves, rushes back and sees the empty cave, and he delivers a crushing verdict to the boys. He tells them, "Because of your foolishness, the game is now scattered to the ends of the earth. The easy life is over. From now on, you and all humans after you will have to hunt for your meat. You will have to track animals through the snow. You'll have to hide in the cold. You will face starvation, and you will have to work tirelessly to survive."
It is the mythological explanation for the end of the hunter-gatherer paradise. The boys ruined the easy meat, but they think they are still safe because they still have Selu. They still have the endless baskets of corn, so they decide to spy on their mother next.
They watch Selu go into her small, empty storehouse. They peek through a crack in the log walls, and what do they see?
They see Selu standing in the middle of the empty room. She rubs her stomach, and a stream of fresh corn pours from her body into the basket. She rubs her sides, and beans pour into the basket. She is literally producing the harvest from her own physical being.
Now, a modern person looking at this myth might say, Wow, what a beautiful, miraculous representation of a mother providing for her children. But what do the boys think when they look through the crack?
They don't see a miracle. They see something terrifying. They believe she's practicing dark magic. They think she is a witch and that the food she is giving them is unnatural and cursed. In their panic and ignorance, they decide the only way to protect themselves is to kill her.
It's a heartbreaking, violent turn. The mother who feeds them is targeted because they don't understand the nature of her sacrifice.
Salu, possessing spiritual foresight, knows what they are planning. Before they strike, she tells them that they are going to kill her, but she gives them a set of highly specific instructions on how to survive after she is gone. She tells them that when she is dead, they must clear a large piece of ground in front of the house. They must then drag her bleeding body in a wide circle over the bare soil exactly 7 times. She promises that if they do this precisely as instructed, a magical crop of corn will spring up overnight and they will never go hungry.
So they kill her. They murder the source of their food. But they have the instructions. Do they follow them?
No. They are impatient, lazy, and exhausted from the murder. Instead of clearing a large, proper field, they only clear a few small, scattered patches of dirt. And instead of dragging her body the sacred 7 times, they drag it only twice before giving up.
The ultimate tragic aha moment of the Cherokee agrarian lifestyle.
Yes. Because they only cleared small patches, corn does not grow wildly everywhere. It only grows in specific cultivated places. And because they only dragged her body twice, humans are cursed to laboriously work the crop planting and harvesting in grueling sweat twice a year just to survive the winter.
The boys' lack of discipline ruins the easy life of hunting, and their violent impatience ruins the easy life of farming. It is the definitive explanation for why human life is so hard. You have to sweat and break your back in the fields under the summer sun, and you have to freeze in the woods tracking scarce deer in the winter, all because of human error.
It teaches a profound moral lesson that grounds their society. The harsh realities of existence are not arbitrary punishments raining down from an angry, unpredictable sky god. They are the direct, logical consequences of failing to follow instructions, of disrespecting boundaries, and of giving in to impatience. The Cherokee brilliantly framed human suffering as a mirror reflecting our own foolishness.
And that concept of human error brings us to the ultimate tragedy. We've explained weather, we've explained labor, but we have to explain the darkest reality of all, the origin of death itself. Why do people die, and why don't they come back? We touched on the sun earlier, and how the conjurers pushed her up to the 7th height to stop her from scorching the earth.
Yes, but the sun was deeply offended by humans. She hated that they squinted and scowled at her brightness. In her anger, she began sending down a terrible, wasting sickness that was killing the people. The human councils decided they couldn't survive this plague. The only way to save humanity was to assassinate the sun.
A bold plan. How do you kill the sun?
You send an assassin. They use magic to transform a man into a venomous snake, the spreading adder. They send the adder to hide outside the sun's house in the sky vault, waiting for her to open her door in the morning so he can strike her.
But the assassin misses his mark.
He misses badly. As the door opens, the adder strikes, but he accidentally bites the sun's daughter instead. The venom is lethal, and the daughter falls dead instantly. The sun is so utterly consumed with shock and grief over the murder of her child that she abandons her track in the sky. She retreats deep into her house, shuts the door, and refuses to shine.
The world is plunged into total, freezing darkness. Now the humans have made things infinitely worse. They have no light, no heat, and their crops will die. They have to make amends to the sun to get the heat back.
Right, so the conjurers travel to the sun's house and beg for forgiveness. The sun tells them there is only one way she will shine again. They must journey to the farthest edge of the spirit world, the twilight land in the west, where the dead go. They must find her daughter's ghost and bring her spirit back to the world of the living.
It's the classic mythological rescue mission, like Orpheus going down into the underworld to retrieve Eurydice.
The parallels are striking. The sun gives the humans a wooden box to carry the spirit, and she gives them one absolute, unbreakable, sacred rule. Once they capture the spirit in the box, they must not, under any circumstances, open the lid until they have returned entirely to the sun's house. If they open the lid even a crack, the magic will break.
So the humans make the harrowing journey to the Twilight Land. They find the spirits of the dead dancing in a circle. They wait for the daughter to dance past. They snatch her spirit, shove her into the wooden box, slam the lid shut, and begin the long, dark journey home.
But as they travel for days through the darkness carrying this box, the girl's spirit inside wakes up. She realizes she is trapped. She begins to cry. Then she begins to beg. She cries out that she is incredibly thirsty. She begs for water. The humans ignore her and keep walking. But then she changes her plea. She says she is suffocating. She begs them, pleading with them to just crack the lid open a tiny fraction of an inch so she can get a single breath of air.
Put yourself in the shoes of those humans carrying the box. You are listening to a child crying out that she is choking to death inside this wooden prison you put her in. They aren't evil. They feel deep sorrow for her. They are acting out of compassion, but also maybe a little bit of human curiosity to see what a spirit looks like.
And once again, impatience overpowers discipline. The leader of the party thinks just a tiny crack won't hurt. He loosens the lid. He cracks it open just a fraction of an inch to let some air in.
And what happens?
Instantly, there is a frantic flutter of wings from inside the dark box. A beautiful, bright red bird shoots out of the tiny crack, streaks past their faces, and flies away into the dense bushes, disappearing forever.
The red bird.
The red bird. The girl's spirit has transformed and escaped. When the devastated humans finally reach the son's house and open the box, it is completely empty. Because they broke the one sacred rule, the daughter is gone forever. The son weeps bitterly, but eventually accepts her fate and returns to the sky to shine, though she remains forever separated from the earth. But the consequence for humanity is absolute. Because they open the box, human death becomes permanent. If they had just kept the lid closed, possessed the discipline to ignore the crying, Mooney's sources say humans would have retained the power to return from the dead.
It's a devastating story. The permanence of human mortality, the finality of the grave, sealed forever by a single fleeting moment of human weakness and misplaced compassion. And it's so frustratingly relatable. Who among us wouldn't crack the lid if someone inside was begging for air? It shows that the rules of the universe are rigid and unforgiving, even when our intentions are completely pure.
It emphasizes that actions have irreversible consequences in the natural world. You can't unopen the box. You can't put the spirit back in, just like you can't unburn a forest or unextinct an animal. You have to live with the reality you've created, with all its laborious farming, its targeted diseases, and its ultimate mortality. But, as this entire framework shows, you aren't left entirely without hope. You have the medicines volunteered by the plant kingdom, you have the warmth of the fire secured by the clever water spider, and you have the beauty of the stars, your own village boys watching over you.
It truly is an elegant, highly functional, deeply observed framework of meaning. These aren't just entertaining fables to tell children around a campfire to pass the time. This is a survival manual. It's an encyclopedia of geography, botany, meteorology, and morality, all woven together into a living tapestry of storytelling that kept a civilization alive in rugged mountains for centuries.
That's the true beauty of immersing yourself in Mooney's collection. When you look at the world through this lens, every single aspect of the environment has a distinct purpose, a deep history, and a direct, ongoing connection to human behavior. You are never walking through a dead, mechanical, indifferent world. You are walking through a living, breathing narrative where every tree and stone remembers what humans have done.
The next time you, our listener, are standing outside and you see a sudden hailstorm sweep over a mountain valley, or you notice the deciduous leaves dropping in the autumn while the pine remains stubbornly green, or you gaze up at the Milky Way on a clear night, try stripping away the modern data for just a moment. Try viewing the landscape through this incredible lens of Cherokee science. It's a powerful reminder that we are active, responsible participants in this ecosystem, not just passengers.
And there is one final, incredibly provocative detail buried in Mooney's ethnographic sources that we should absolutely leave the listener to mull over tonight.
Oh, yes. I know exactly what you're talking about, and it completely blew my mind when I read it.
We've spent this whole time talking about the sun and the moon. The sun who scorches the earth, the sun who was pushed up to the seventh height, the sun whose grief caused the permanence of death. But according to the most ancient traditions Mooney recorded, the Cherokee believed that the sun and the moon, as immensely powerful as they are, were not the ultimate creators of the universe.
They aren't the top of the pyramid.
No, they were actually just deputies. They were left in charge of this specific world by a group of higher, unnamed, unimaginably powerful creators from a true upper world who simply returned to the deeper sky after making the Mud Island.
The sun and the moon are just middle management.
Exactly. The mighty sun who controls life and death is just a local supervisor. So if the sun and moon are just deputies and the stars are just glowing, feathered creatures or floating truant boys that sometimes fall to the earth as birds.
What does that say about the vast, undiscovered hierarchy of the universe that the Cherokee envisioned lying just beyond that solid rock vault of the sky? If this whole incredible complex system of thunderers, icemen, plant councils, and magical animal caves is just the local branch office,
Sure.
what else is waiting up there? The true upper world.
It's a question that makes the universe feel infinitely larger and more mysterious, even as these stories try so hard to domesticate it and make it feel like home.
It really does. Because when you step fully into the world of Cherokee oral science, suddenly our clean, modern, data-driven X-ray machine of reality feels a little too simple, a little too sterile. We're looking at a cosmological landscape that is rich, murky, dangerous, and brilliantly alive. The climate thermostat isn't just a dial, it's the conjurers pushing the sun by handbreadths. The winter storm isn't just a barometric pressure front, it's the Iceman violently unbraiding his hair. It's a world where absolutely nothing is random and everything remembers.